It's Speak It Thursday, and it's your girl Shuli. I am back again. As you know, we're here, we're live. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you drop your city when you tune in. It's another Thursday, and of course, it's going down. We have a hello from Texas. We have a hello from Monroe, Louisiana. Welcome to all who have tuned in. Wow. So much is going on. Early voting started October 13th, my birthday. Hello, Dallas. Welcome to Speak It. And if you're tuning in live or catching us on HOH 77.7, Google Podcasts, or iHeartMedia, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, welcome. We have some things to talk about. Before I bring on our guest tonight, Mr. Chris Senegal, when I told him that I wanted to talk about what's going on with Ice Cube, of course, we wanted to talk about Black wealth tonight. We're still going to talk about that. Building your come up, but perfect. All the rage has been our brother, Ice Cube. Yes. And what's going on in politics, right? So I think we need to talk about that a little bit. I want to know how you feel. So what is your thought process? Like, what's your thought? Or what are your thoughts about Ice Cube and what's going on with him? With this, right? His contract with Black America. And I feel like we've been talking about it so much, but I've seen bits and pieces of it, but I'm not sure what it says. So I took some time to review it and I want to go through it and I want us to talk about it. And then Chris is going to come on and share with us knowledge, right? Building community, how we can close this wealth gap. We're talking about economic equality, right? Or economic equality, however you say it, right? Potato. But happy belated birthday. Thank you. So let's get into it. Without further ado, we're going to talk a little bit about this contract with Black America. And this is a summary, right? I'm not going through all of it. It's several pages. But first of all, it's suggesting how we can truly have a more perfect union, the more perfect union that all Americans deserve. And also that it says that as such, it's time for a complete paradigm shift in how we run our institutions and operate our country. I think we could agree on that for sure. It's time for a change. It's time for something solid. We need not just to hear it from the powers that be, but I feel like a change from within. I've been having conversations with people about this at just different points. And even today, I talked to someone and said, the biggest change is growth. We need to grow. When you grow as people, then we can be the change that we want to see. There are people that feel like it's a little too late. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you all for the birthday wishes. Thank you. It is definitely Libra season. And Chris Senegal that's coming on, he is a Libra as well. We are about that balance. We are about justice. But Asan Taylor says, Ice Cube, a little too late for his agenda or whatever it is he is trying to do. So what else? What are you thinking about it? Is he too late? Should he have been talking about this in 2016? Should we have been talking about this before the current president was in office? We just need to dig a little deeper. We're going to throw out our opinions and then we're going to have Mr. Senegal to come and really break it down for us. She says, Asan Taylor says, I feel like he may come in good faith, but his timing with the politicians is too late and not right now in the height of election period. What are we, 20 days out? And then we're talking about it. But honestly, I heard him talking about it a few months ago, and it really made me a little concerned and a little nervous because my thought process was that maybe it could be divisive for those undecided voters. People have been saying things like, they can't trust anybody, so they don't know if they want to vote or not. But if we were to be honest, when it comes to politics, has it been a fair game? I mean, like, ever been a fair game in terms of people have their own agendas. It's up to people to lobby. It's up to people to be an activist. And when we had Brother Derek Muhammad on back in, when was this? March. We talked about activism, and activism is something that you do. It's not just about the marching and things that we see that we think activism really is, but he said activism is something pretty practical that we can do every day, right? Just by being who we are, being the best, giving back to the community, circulating the money in the community by me being who I am as a speech pathologist, that if I'm doing things to better the community, use my gifts and my talents and my resources to better the community, that also is activism. So if you're a teacher, to teach in the neighborhoods, policing our own communities, the mental health side, whatever it is that you do, if you do that, you do it more consistently and you do it for the uplifting and the betterment of your community and the people around you. And we say a lot about for the culture, this is for the culture, this is for the culture. And our music and dancing and things like that from the entertainment perspective, that's more than our culture, right? We come from a legacy of excellence. Our ancestors were all about excellence. And once we tap into our power as a people and we recognize who we are and that we've contributed so much in society, in the world abroad, we're going to be better off. Right now, I'm not sure if everybody gets it, but once we truly tap in and start moving in who we are and working together as a collective, look, none of this stuff won't even matter. You can run the political game, whatever. People are saying my vote doesn't matter. If our vote doesn't matter, why are they pandering? Why are they coming and trying to buy our votes? Why do they run to our churches? Why are they doing what they do? When I say they, I mean the politicians. So our vote really does matter. We have more power than we realize. No, we surrender that power when we choose not to vote. We surrender that power when we choose not to show up and have our voices heard in our children's schools, in government meetings, local government, and whatever. We have to be involved and not be reactive, not just when someone has been gunned down, not just when we're upset about something that goes around in social media. We need to be active. We need to be intentional about how we use our voices. That's just it. So we're going to get more into this contract with Black America as we're gearing up for Mr. Senegal to come on and talk to us more about it. He's going to take us to school tonight. So it says this contract with Black America strikes at the heart of racism and presents a blueprint to achieve racial economic justice. It was written in the backdrop of the killing of George Floyd, which set off a wave of protests not seen since the civil rights era of the 1950s and 60s, and a global pandemic in which the Black mortality rate is more than double the white rate, and in which 45%, nearly half of Black-owned businesses close. So that's pretty much, it has the introduction, and then it has several parts. And I'll just go through and just pretty much list those because we want to do more discussion than reading. But I feel like in order for us to have a good discussion, I need to set the scene, or we need to have a foundation. We're talking about it and we're responding emotionally, and I want to have the information. I want to know more about what's in it. So this is a summary, and this can be found on contractwithblackamerica.us. Do the research, fact check. Let's figure out, is this solid? Is this something that we can work with? Barring the timing. The timing is like, I don't know what we're going to do about this, boss. But yeah, so the first part of it is, it says bill to guarantee Black opportunity and representation. And that says adopt a plan of neo-reconstruction to redress past wrongs systematically imposed on Black Americans economically throughout many generations that has resulted in a wealth gap. So to address that, and pretty much stating that things that we've heard so much and that we know, right, that the average white family has 10 times the wealth of a Black family. So righting those wrongs or redressing those issues. So closing the wealth gap. And then number 2, bank lending reform. So posing that, right? We know that we don't get the loans at the rate that we need to, or that we could qualify for. Number 3, federal funding of baby bonds. What does that mean? Pretty much giving children $1,000 or a bond at birth, newborns $1,000 contribution to families making less than $50,000 a year that the children can get access to when they're 18. So yeah, tell me your thoughts. So right now we're chatting. What do you think about Ice Cube? We're going to put that right there. We're going to create a banner. You drop your city. That's our big question. Drop your city. Let us know what you think. What do you think about Ice Cube's stance? If you can hear my little Kermit fingers typing over here, I'm just like typing away. What do you think about his stance? All right, so we talked about, so we're on number 4. Number 4, that fourth part says Federal Reserve and government pensions. So for qualified Black Americans, Federal Reserve to allow a one-time interest-free loan for home ownership. What do y'all think about that? You think that's something that we can get, that we can do, that's likely to happen? So yeah, Federal Reserve and government pensions, finance oversight. And this just says a banking commission or even a cabinet or a sub-cabinet post will be set up to overlook and report on Black and minority lending, housing, ownership, and mortgages, and enforcement of items 2 and 3. And then there's personal data and credit. So trying to help us get our credit straight. So credit services will be reformed to mandate consideration of individual consumer data on rent, utilities, cell phone, and other like bill payments. So help us get our credit straight. Prison reform is number 7, and judicial reform is number 8. And then also, and that's that when you talk about prison reform, doing away with abolishing privately run prisons. And number 8, judicial reform, eliminate mandatory minimums and 3 strike laws. And number 9, a police reform act, which we've been talking about, right? Number 10, FCC licensing of public airwaves, which means broadcast networks will be required to air Black produced content equal to 20% of the total content on the network as measured by time. Number 11, Confederate monuments and institutions. So elimination of all these Confederate statues, things that we've been pushing for, especially in the wake of the events with George Floyd, may he rest in peace. This week was his birthday. And so we have that. And the last thing, AJP program for education and jobs. And then 13, it talks about Black responsibility. So there are 13 different articles, and we're about to get into this. It's 7:15. Without further ado, thank you all. Someone says, oh, Sports Talk with Friends, one of our sponsors, says, I like the baby bond idea. And then Asan Taylor says, I feel like he may come in good faith, but, and we said that earlier, but it's timing. So we have the issues with the timing. We have the issues with, is this really legit? Is it feasible? So we talked about that. That's what's going on in the news. But who we have on tonight is already carrying this out. He's walking it out in his everyday life. Again, when we talk about the culture, what he's doing is for the culture. He says that I'm not looking for a come up, I'm building one. And Christopher Senegal he's a speaker, he's a risk taker, he's a freedom chaser, he's an HBCU alum, he's a part of the D9, he's just all around just Black man to its fullest in its greatness, and he's walking it out, and we have him on with us tonight. So without further ado, we're gonna bring him in. And just in case you don't know who he is, most of the people in Houston, and I think all over, because he was buzzing, right? He was trending. He is buying up the block, buying back the block, and I'm going to say buying back the blocks in the historic 5th Ward here in Houston, Texas. And the way he did it was amazing. He started out, using his own money. And he's going to tell us more about his story, and I won't take that away from him, but he brought people in on it, say, hey, and he said, we can do this together. We can build as a community. And he crowdfunded over $1 million. We might as well round it off and say $1.1 million to fund this project, not just for houses, but we're talking about businesses, and we're talking about revitalizing a community that is now a cultural arts district. So the sky is the limit. And we share our love by hearts. So let's bring on Chris. Hi, Chris.
Hi, how are you? How are you? That's such a great introduction. I appreciate that.
Look, I'm telling you, I'm fanning. From the time I met you and I first heard your story, and we're going to get into that. But first of all, how are you doing?
I'm great. Staying busy.
Yeah, you're out here working. You're like, COVID, what? We still have a community to build.
This is true. Very much true.
Yeah, but when I first met you, it was with Wendy Turner. You were on her show, Rise Up and Pray.
Right.
And you had everybody in the studio with their mouths open, like, okay, yeah, this is amazing. You're right, and you're doing this. And I felt like with everything that's going on right now, I'm a low key, I don't even know if it's a low key, I'm an activist, but I'm learning more and more about activism and how I can use my voice and how we can do it in a practical way. So I was like, I have to have it on. We have to have the money talk.
Yeah, definitely. That's the most important part. That's the part that's been missing. So
exactly. So tell us about you. We know what the news has said. We've read all the articles, but for real, who is Chris?
So I was born in Lake Charles, Louisiana, grew up in Port Arthur, Texas, went to Southern University, HBCU, got my engineering degree because everybody said to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer. And engineer was 4 years, so I figured I'd take the shortcut to success. And then I got into the corporate world and realized, I don't like this so much, Felt like I was kind of sold a dream, if you would say. And so, at that point, I just figured I had to create an exit strategy to get out of that cycle quickly, because I didn't want to be caught in it for 40 years. So real estate just kept coming up, and after about a year, I decided that I was going to jump in head first. So started doing the typical HGTV model, fix and flip, everything that they make you think is so attractive. And I did that for about 5 years while I kept my corporate job, which was pretty cool. And but after a while, I realized, even networking with other people that were doing the same thing that I was, that looked like me, nobody was really talking about gentrification, and nobody was really talking about how flippers can actually negatively affect the gentrification process. You can actually accelerate gentrification if you're not being cognizant of what you're doing.
Oh, wow. See, I didn't even really think about that, because like you said, we talk about gentrification like it's happening, and that's horrible. But then flipping, we see that as we're going in, because to me, flipping, that's what I like about you. Flipping serves us as an individual when we do it, but it hurts our community, is what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going into our community and you're knocking on doors and asking people to sell their homes, and and they don't really understand what they're doing, and maybe somebody you go knock on somebody's door that's 7 years old and talk them into selling their house to you, and you go renovate the house and sell it to somebody else who doesn't look like the community. Well, you've moved you moved the homeowner out of the community, and that person may have made, even if they make 70, 80 grand cash from the purchase. What if they live to be 100? That's 30 years. They got to live off of $80,000, So we don't think about that part of what we're doing. Or you go into a community and you're taught to buy a property, renovate it, and then raise the rent as high as you can to make maximum profit. Well, then if you price it so high that the community can't afford it, then what are you really doing? You're only inviting people from outside the community back in.
That's true. You're pricing the people out of the community.
Right. So there has to be a balance, right? There has to be a way that you can still make money. You can still be an investor, but you can be a socially responsible investor. And so that's been my whole focus through like the investing and the development project. Is my whole model now is a zero displacement model, where we can revitalize our communities and bring them back to the prominence that they once had without the displacement component of the process.
I love that. And then Fifth Ward, tell us about, how did you identify? Because to me, it's about, like, the new trend is the blah, 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 blah for me. It's the vision for me. So when I see this, back this up. You're Libra. So happy birthday. It's Libra season. How old are you? Let's go ahead and set the stage here.
I just turned 37.
Just turned 37. And how long have you been doing this?
I started when I was 24. So 2008. Yep.
So 2008. So you've
13
been,
years. 13 years. Yeah.
wow. And you've been learning a lot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Just always constantly growing and not being content or complacent at any level that I was at. Always pursuing something bigger. Like you said earlier, like it's kind of a fix and flip is kind of a selfish business, and it doesn't really impact the whole community. And it's hard for you to give back, and it's hard for you to have collective participation in in that process. So
yeah.
for me, it's always about how do you get to that next level.
So yeah, so when did you get the vision for what you're currently doing? And then we're gonna get into that. So you historic Fifth Ward, like you said, as we call it here in Houston, some people affectionately call it the nickel. How the vision for that?
Some things that they say if you wanted to plan them out a certain way, they would never happen that way. And for me, I don't know if I've ever really told this full story, but so I turned 37 last week. When I turned 27, I went out and on the way home I got stopped, and it was a police officer, black police officer, pulled me over, and he asked me had I been drinking, and I said, yeah, I had. It was my birthday. I thought it was gonna be like, okay, just make it home safe. You look sober, blah blah blah. Nope, he took me to jail. Long story short, I ended up having to do volunteer work to prevent getting a DUI on my record. While I was volunteering in the park at George Bush Park in Houston, I happened to meet the manager that was over the maintenance for the park, and his side hustle was investing in real estate. And he worked with a group. He was an older white gentleman. He worked with real estate investors. And I started talking to him. I was like, man, I flip houses too. And he's like, okay, how do you pick your houses? And I was like, oh, I just look for the deals. I look at the numbers. It's a formula. He's like, no. He's like, you got to look at the city plans. He says, you got to watch where the redevelopment is going. He said, that's how we pick all of our projects, because we know that's how all the upside happens and where the biggest opportunity is. And so from then, that opened my eyes up to a completely different world.
Mm-hmm.
And so Fifth Ward came on my radar because I started studying redevelopment in Houston. And I was like, okay, started in the Heights. And so for people that aren't familiar with Houston, 45 kind of divides Houston north and south. It started in the Heights, which is right on the west side, and it went counterclockwise around downtown. And, it had started in Third Ward at that point in time, but Fifth Ward was still untouched. So I'm like, okay, if you follow trends, eventually it's gonna come back to this area. This was a historically black neighborhood. And gentrification had really taken its effect. So I was like, okay, this is probably a good market to move into. So that's how I got into it. Did I know what I was gonna do? Did I know I was gonna be a developer? Did I know I would have a crowdfunding? No, I had no idea of any of those things, but I just knew that you put the energy in the right things, and you take the right actions, then eventually the story will fulfill itself.
Come on now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So where does faith come in with this? Because I'm hearing you say that you're like, I had no idea, but what I'm hearing is you just seem like you're just available. You're just out here willing to learn and
it's 100% faith, because you don't know. I mean, and one of my favorite quotes is faith and fear both require you to have belief in something you do not know. So you choose which route you want to go. So either you believe it's not going to be good, or you believe it'll come together, right? Faith or fear. And so for me, it's really all about faith. So I'm just a strong believer that if you put the work in, you put the energy out there, then God will bring everything together and everything will align. And that's more important than you figuring out every step of the process.
Yeah, exactly. Sports Talk with Friends says faith. Yes, I have a group called Fear to Freedom. And I started on my freedom journey back in 2014. I was never the same, right? I just packed up everything, changed how I did business, changed how I did life. And you're right. I'm about alignment over hustle any day, any day. So now when it comes to the narrative about, like you said, gentrification, you're changing the narrative. And tell us more about how your projects and the way you move, how that's changing that narrative.
Yeah, so my first project was something that's probably a little bit counterintuitive to how most of us think about our neighborhoods, our communities. We focus a lot on making sure that we create housing in our communities that the existing residents can afford. So we focus a lot on low-income housing, which is great. That's definitely needed in our communities. But what we miss is the fact that there are a lot of us that come from these same communities that go on to do better in life and go on to get good jobs and have these corporate careers. And the salutations that those groups get after they've done all that work and they've taken those big risks and taken on all these student loans and sacrifice to get to a better level is you can't come back to the neighborhood. You have to go to the suburbs.
Correct.
Right? Because we don't have any houses here for you. Well, in reality, if you look at the history of our community, especially historically Black neighborhoods, especially pre-desegregation, so back when everything was segregated, we all lived in the same communities: the doctors, the lawyers, the business owners, whether they owned the cleaners, the movie theater, the Black banks. We all lived in the same community.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to bring that back. We have to reacclimate our neighborhoods to what they used to be. And so my first project is new construction. So I took a block that was an old abandoned grocery store and a bunch of drug houses and cleaned it up. And then I decided to do market rate housing that would attract the young working professional back to the community. Because as much I always study the problems that we always identify and the solutions that we always think are right that never work. And one big problem we have in our community is the flight of businesses, the closing of businesses, the lack of grocery stores. And we think it's a government issue. We think it's a business to just elect to come back to the community, or we can pressure them to do that, or we can tell the mayor to fund something to bring a free grocery store in. But at the end of the day, that's a business. And a business has to have patronage, and it has to have customers that can make it and keep it profitable. So if we're in our communities, if we're only focusing on the low income folks and we are not bringing the higher income people back, it's impossible for those businesses to thrive. So we have to bring the higher incomes back. We absolutely have to. And like the model that I did with this project, I didn't displace anybody because I didn't go knock on anybody's door, ask them to sell their house. I took a block of property that was actually a nuisance for the neighborhood, cleaned it up, got rid of all of the blight, and now I'm bringing in new construction and bringing young Black working professionals back to the community.
That so dope. Because in the beginning, though, before you started this, tell me what you did, the plan for a Black America that Ice Cube talked about and all of the reform. And one of the things is, of course, judicial reform. But did you do something, to help ex-cons? Tell us about your project that you had going and how you utilize them.
So that's the same property. So
okay,
I bought it in 2013, and 2014, it kind of happened on accident. So it was like I had 4 houses on the property, and there was 2 apartments above the old grocery store. And I had a guy with the record, a felon, come to me and say, "Hey, can I rent somewhere to live? Because part of my parole is I have to have a stable place of residence. I have to keep a job." And he's like, "I have this felony. Nobody's letting me stay." And so I was like, "Yeah, you can stay." But he couldn't afford to rent a whole house. So I had one of the houses vacant. So I let him rent one room. Mm-hmm. And then that turned to his parole officer coming out there and seeing how he was doing, asking if I would take on more. So eventually the entire property ended up being filled with people that had transitioned out of prison. I only took non-violent offenders, but they all had felonies and couldn't really get anywhere to live. So giving them an opportunity to have a stable place of residence, something that they could afford. It was like $350 per room with all bills paid. And but even from an investment perspective, I could put 4 guys in one house, and I could make $1,400 off of a house that, if I was just trying to rent it to a family, even on Section 8, would only rent for like $700, right? So it was a win-win, and it really helped the community. The guys kept the place up. They were just happy to have a stable place to live. They all had trades. They were like carpenters, plumbers, electricians, all these trades they had learned in prison. So that actually helped me too, because if anything went wrong, I'd just bring materials and they would fix it, because they were just happy to have somewhere to live. So
what was the impact on their life? Were you able to kind of measure that to see a difference it made? Like, where are they now?
Yeah, so a lot of them transitioned out. A lot of them stayed there till they got off parole, and they were able to go on and continue their growth trajectory that they were on. Mm-hmm. I had some. It's not all roses. I probably had 40 or 50 guys go through there from the time I was doing that program. I had a couple that didn't make it. One guy overdosed on synthetic drugs. But the majority of the story was positive. And the majority of the story was their families could come and visit them. They could see them doing better, and a lot of them were able to, just transition into normal life out of that place. And when I decided to do the new construction development on the property, I actually let my property manager, who was helping me, take over that program. So we just found another location for it, and she relocated the program over there, and she still runs it now.
Wow. What kind of, maybe this is 2-in-1 question, what kind of mindset do you have to do the type of work that you're doing now on this level? What kind of mindset do you have to have? And then how has that stretched you or grown you as a man?
The mindset is definitely one of not being afraid of failure and not being afraid of people not understanding what you're doing, and not wasting your energy and your time trying to convince people that it's going to work. Because those things can deter you, those things can distract you, and they basically become a deficit from the energy that you can put into whatever idea or vision you have. Everything I'm doing, from the new construction, when I decided I was going to do the project, a lot of people were like, nobody's going to buy a house in that part of Fifth Ward. Nobody wants to live there. You're crazy, blah, blah, blah. But, the houses sold before they were complete. And it's not that I was talking to negative people. These are some of these guys, master's degrees, very well educated, high corporate status, African Americans that were, just giving you the type of feedback that we're accustomed to giving each other because of what we think, because we have not seen an example. So for me, it was more so, let me create the model, let me show them, and let me stop trying to convince them.
Yeah, that's that next level thinking, like you said, and that's where vision carries you too, because everybody doesn't have to get your vision. You just have to get the vision.
Correct. 100%.
That is it. So Black Wall Street, what influence did that have on you? Because you shared a story in the way you broke it down, because I've read articles about it, but I could tell like that was a thing. You like really studied that model. What influence did that have on you in your development?
It was powerful. I mean, I want to correct a misconception of Black Wall Street. The conception of Black Wall Street is that it happened one time in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And the reality is the one in Tulsa, Oklahoma was actually an anomaly because it got destroyed and it got torn down and burned down. But every Black neighborhood you go to now, when you see these abandoned businesses, you have to realize they didn't just spring up out the ground and look like that. Those used to be thriving businesses. During segregation, when we could not patronize other businesses and other communities, we had to have our own everything. Okay. I mentioned that earlier, the doctors, the lawyers, the theaters, the banks, the grocery stores, everything was in the community. And when you really stop and think about it, desegregation happened in the 60s. So before that, so from the late 1800s to like 1950s, we ran all these businesses. We hired our own people in our own community. And some of these people that started these businesses actually knew actual freed slaves. Their grandparents might have actually been a slave, but they're starting banks and they're running businesses. And I'm like, wait a minute. So if these people can do it, why do we use that as the excuses why we can't do it today? It makes no sense.
Correct. We have more resources. We have more education. We have access to more information than ever before. So what do you think keeps us, like you said, other than mindsets that we have that like barriers to it, but what keeps us from thriving the way we once did?
I think we just got caught up in a process of fighting for acceptance instead of fighting for independence and the right to be treated equal. So the civil rights movement started off as us fighting to be able to vote, to be able to, take advantage of everything that was in the Constitution. And then it evolved into us focusing so much on changing someone else's perception of us, another group's perception of us, instead of kind of moving like some of the other groups did, where they just kind of stuck within themselves, right? Now, that's needed. So I don't want to negate that. I don't want to say that was not something that was beneficial to us. but we should have. I feel like we missed the step of continuing to grow our own communities in that process. A lot of people don't know this, but some people might not like what I'm saying right now. But I really want you to study Dr. Martin Luther King, and the majority of his life, he was all about equality. And then towards the end, when some of the promises that even the current president gave him didn't come to fruition, he realized it should have been about economics and us building our own communities. And the speech that he gave in Memphis, Tennessee, 12 hours before he was assassinated, was collectively the African American community would be the 9th largest country in the world if we pulled our capital, behind Russia, United States, and a couple of European countries. And he talked about how we could put money into our own institutions. He talked about from insurance companies to banks and all this other kind of stuff. So you think about everything that he went through his whole life, from the March in Selma, all that stuff. And within 12 hours of his second speech talking about what we should be doing collectively, he gets assassed. So
when he started talking, that was a different talk, right? That was a
completely different conversation.
Yeah.
And it can be, I think it can be intimidating to groups that are in power, but it shouldn't be about separation. It should just be like about community growth and community improvement.
Come on. Yep. And so that was what I'm hearing is we are a nation. And once we get that, I think that mindset. And at the beginning, I was talking about a conversation I had, like, what is it that we need to do? And the person that I talked to this about has a mental health background, and they were like, grow. When we grow as individuals and we're elevated in our mindset, then a lot of the issues that we deal with and the problems that we face as a community, she feels like they will be non-issues for us.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I agree. Well, yeah, I don't know if non-issue is the right word, but I think we would be farther along as a collective group. And I think part of the problem is we spend a lot of time trying to convince everybody to be on the same page instead of just doing something. So the perfect example for that is a poor Caucasian man decided one day that he was going to start Walmart, right? He's going to start his own store. So imagine if Sam Walton waited till all of the rest of his friends and family in the poor Caucasian community that he lived in, that probably lived in the trailer park. Imagine if he waited till all of them got it before he started Walmart, right? Now he's got one of the biggest companies in the world. His heirs are now billionaires, and he employs so many of those people from that same community that still don't get it. They don't even know what he did. They don't realize what he sacrificed to get to that level. So imagine if more of us just start like that. And if we don't worry about the rest of us getting it, but the ones that get it, you make your move, and everybody else will benefit, whether they understand or not.
I love that. Like you said, built the come up. He built the come up. So then we have our vision. What else do we need to know? You have this time, you're telling us, and then we're about to get into this contract with Black America, like thinking about that, thinking about where we are politically and just as a race. What is it that we need to know, and what should we be doing like right now?
I believe we have the group that is doing what they need to do to make sure that our civil issues are taken care of, and we can never have enough of that. But on the other side of that coin, we do have to focus more on the economics. And I mean, I know that's kind of that word, people may not really understand what it means, but we have to focus on the business of controlling our communities and rebuilding our communities in a positive way, not necessarily and this is something else I talk about that some people may not like, but inclusive growth. Okay. When you go to a community, you go to Little Mexico, you go to Little Italy, you go to Chinatown, it's clear they have a lot of pride in their culture, right? But it's also, I mean, you go to Chinatown, the signs might even be in Chinese, but when you walk into a business, they're welcoming. Why? Because they want your money to come into the community, right? And we all know the money doesn't leave that community because they hire themselves.
Yeah.
They keep all that money there. So if we adapted more of a model like that, I feel like we would be in a better position. Because right now the dollar leaves the Black community very quickly. So goal number one, of course, is try to keep it in the community. But goal number two, if a dollar used to leave every 6 minutes or every 6 hours, whatever the number is, How about we bring $1 in from outside the community back into the community every 6 hours and keep it in? You know, that's the opposite. And that's what the real goal should be, because that's how we rebuild ourselves.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Not just about our dollar, but it's about the dollar. So we build our businesses and we want to keep our dollar there. We want to have resources. We want to have services. But like you said, but let's reach out. It's an extension. So if we have services that people want, don't turn them away either.
That's right. I mean, one of the wealthiest humans to ever exist is Mansa Musa, who was a king in Mali in Africa. But he wasn't all Mali everything. He wasn't all African everything. He had so much wealth because he did business and trade with every continent, with every culture, with everybody. And so we have to not be so caught up on proving something to ourselves or trying to prove something to somebody else that we exclude ourselves from the possibilities of what we could build by allowing them to patronize us and participate in what we have going on. Now, there's always going to be a racist group. There's always going to be a prejudiced group. And I think, we think that that's exclusive to us, and it's really not. A lot of people don't even know Australia was going through a civil rights movement with the Aborigines and the European group, just like we were at the same time. A lot of people don't realize that there's classism in countries where everybody's all the same race. You look at India, the rich people, in India, it's worse because whatever class you're born into, you can't even escape that class no matter how bad you want to work, how hard you work. Russia's the same way, and they're all Caucasian. So it's certain things that we focus on a lot that we feel like are isolating us, when if you really look at the bigger picture, you're not going to fix those issues. That's just humanity in general. So we need to focus on building where we can, and stop trying to change the nature of humans overall. As a group, like I said, yes, you always need people that are fighting for that, but we need more people looking at the other side of the coin, because that's what we've been missing.
Yeah, that's good. So understanding human nature, because like you said, a lot of it has been when it talks about Black Lives Matter. Now we have the contract with Black America. Like how do you feel about Ice Cube's stance with this?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I want you to give me your opinion first, because I haven't really been paying that much attention to it. I've been so busy in my own lane.
That's a word in itself.
Yeah.
That's a word in itself. So basically, the contract with Black America, he's been talking about it for some time. Actually, I've been peeping this, where essentially he says, hey, we can withhold our vote. Like, I don't trust anybody. They need to talk to us. This is our opportunity. Nobody is really, nobody as in the politicians. They have not given us a solid plan for what they're going to do for Black America. If you want our vote, then here is what we need. And I'll just run off a couple of them. Police reform, FCC licensing of public airwaves, Confederate monuments and institutions, AGP program for education and jobs, Black responsibility. He's outlined all of these things. It's 13 different things. And a part of it is personal data and credit, finance oversight, federal reserves and government pensions, federal funding of baby bonds. So basically giving a bond to all newborns, $1,000 bond to all newborns born into families that make less than $50,000 a year, bank lending reform. And then the number one part was guarantee Black opportunity and representation. First time homeowners get an interest-free loan, things like that. So it was all those different things. That was just a summary of it. But essentially, he says that the Republican Party was willing to talk to him, but the Democratic Party was not willing to talk to him. So he had the conversation, and people are mad.
Well, I mean, it's a reality. It goes back to what I was talking about earlier. The stance that I kind of have on our community and the economics and the owning businesses, creating businesses. That's more the stance of the Republican Party. I think Democrats, for the most part, are all about social issues, but not the economics of actually growing and building businesses. People don't realize that the reason why wealthy people usually get tax breaks is because they own businesses and they employ thousands of people. and those thousands of people pay taxes, and that those taxes are what goes into funding the government for everything. So if they're going to give the people that take the risk, that start these businesses and these corporations, they're going to give them a tax break because they want them to continue to do that. But no, I think that's great. And I feel like, let's be blunt.
Be blunt. Come on.
Let's be blunt. If you're dealing with a prejudice or a racist white person, not all of them are like that. Some of them are. I work with a lot of really great white people, and I hate the fact that we throw them all in the same bucket. I hate the fact that we don't ask them, was your grandparents fighting on the side for us to be free, or were they fighting on the other side? Because a lot of them were fighting for us to have equality and be free. But we never bring that conversation up. We treat them all the same. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's a sidebar. But the ones that are racist, if their daughter brought home an Asian man or a Mexican man or a Jewish man, in some cases, they would not like that situation just as much as they would not like it with us. But they do more business with those other groups because those other groups are more focused on carrying their own communities, and they do business together. It's for the majority of us, we don't do a lot of business on the level that they do, right? Mm-hmm. So when it comes to the Republican Party, I think some of them they don't understand why we are so focused on asking someone to give us an equal opportunity, and they don't see us trying to do things in our own community as much. Whether they're correct about that perception or not, a lot of them are wrong about it, but that's just how they think. Mm-hmm. But I think when they see someone like an Ice Cube, who used to be a gangster rapper and now he's a multi-millionaire, and he's got all these businesses, and he's employing all these black actors and actresses that wouldn't have jobs otherwise, and all these black athletes that would not have a career anymore if he hadn't started Big Three, they're open to have a conversation with him, because okay, you think like us as entrepreneurs, as business people, you think like us, and that's okay to I think that's okay to have that conversation. Okay. A lot of people don't realize the political parties have shifted some, but the KKK were really originally all Democrats.
Mm-hmm. That's true. The policies have shifted. Yeah.
The policies have shifted. So, I mean, and politics is very tricky. It's a slippery slope. You focus so much on that you miss the mark on really building for yourself. And I would say one thing that I always talk about amongst my peer group is voting is cool. Voting helps. But from the day a politician is in office to the day a politician leaves office, there's a lobbyist talking to them, pushing an agenda. And that's how the real legislation gets made. That's how everything gets voted on the floor. The lobbyists are doing that. And we don't focus on lobbying at all. Mm-hmm. I think that's another area that we really need to spend more time and energy and effort on, So
that's what I've learned in this process too, as I have really sought to just increase my knowledge of how can we really have true change. That has been my question. Definitely, I'm using my voice and things like that. But beyond marching, like you said, beyond voting, to me, it's voting and it's marching and it's. Right. I've been like, how do we have true change? Mm-hmm. And with that, like you said, lobbyists, using our money for the right way, using our voices to get in the right room. And here's my question. When we get in those rooms, do we have the responsibility, in your opinion, even though we might not be in the same tax, I'm saying we, like an Ice Cube, he's not in the same tax bracket as someone who's working and trying to feed a single mother trying to feed her family. But does he have a responsibility to the community, to the culture, when he gets in those rooms to do things to serve the community at large, even though he's in a different space?
I'm on the fence about that one, because yes, I feel like, me personally, if I'm in that position, I'm definitely gonna speak up and address some things and use my position to better my my people. Mm-hmm. But there's also another side of that equation where you don't have to necessarily be so boisterous to be effective. So do you know who A.G. Gaston is?
No, school me.
Okay. A.G. Gaston was he was a black entrepreneur in Birmingham, Alabama, that realized early on that he worked in the coal mines, started working in the coal mines, but he realized every time a black person died in the coal mines, because no white insurance companies would give them insurance policies, everybody had to pass the hat every time somebody died. So he started the first black insurance company in Birmingham.
Okay.
And his business grew because he was the only game in town. He expanded into hotels. He expanded into several businesses. And when the civil rights movement came about, he never marched. He stayed in good with all the politicians. But every time Jesse Jackson, Dr. King, the whole clan came down, for their movements, he was the person that housed them at the hotels for free. Nobody talks about that side. You ever wonder who?
Yeah.
You ever wonder who bailed everybody out of jail after they got arrested? They didn't just let you out for free. A.G. Gaston was behind that whole movement, right? So there's different ways that you need people to play different roles, to do different things, to be a part of empowering the community. So yeah, I feel like there should be a responsibility, there should be some type of obligation, but you cannot judge somebody for the way they choose to participate or what they choose to do in that process.
Fair. That's fair enough. I had, again, Brother Derek Muhammad on back in March. That was one of my very first interviews, and he talked about activism. And again, that's what helped me as I was trying to figure out what to do. And so basically what you're saying is, too, the thing that you do it for the betterment of your community, whatever your lane is. You're doing it in, whether it's resources, it might be the money, it might be the time, it might be the knowledge, whatever those things are. That's dope. So I'm going to do a couple of comments here. Asan Taylor says she agrees. She commented here too. She said, yes, we failed to do the important footwork. Not that we don't want to, so we just don't know how.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that too.
Yeah.
A lot of it's a lack of information, lack of knowledge, lack of exposure. So it's important to have these type of communications, these type of conversations to keep communication alive and kind of spread the information. Yeah.
For sure. And of course, Sports Talk with Friends said speak facts, and 100. So they're enjoying the conversation. Robin Gibson said not getting distracted, trying to convince others. That was a word. So when you said that earlier, and she's thankful for this information. And again, it's the conversation that we needed to have. We talked about your projects. Is there anything else? Where are we? I know I'm a shareholder, proud to say.
Love it, yeah.
And I felt like I just want to do my part. I wanted to push, and I know a couple other people that were willing to do their part. So where are we? I know we have a meeting coming up. So give us the status on the project currently, and what are we looking forward to in the next 5 years?
Sure. Okay. So the project, for everybody that doesn't know, I was able to secure a portfolio of rental properties, 18 houses and 2 commercial buildings, right on Lyons Avenue, which was the Black Wall Street in 5th Ward. And about 3/4 of a mile from there, the same developer that built the biggest mixed-use development in Houston, it's a project called City Center on the west side. Same developers has bought 150 acres on the south end of 5th Ward to build a very similar concept on Buffalo Bayou. And what's going to happen is what usually happens is we don't participate in controlling anything that happens around these big developments, so the entire community gets gentrified. Well, this was an opportunity for us to buy a significant portfolio of properties that have long-term tenants. Some of these renters have been there for 19, 20 years, literally. And so for us to be able to, I was able to get the property and negotiate a good deal from the sellers where they financed it to me without using the bank. And, I was able to say, this is an opportunity for us to show that we don't have to be mad at Oprah. We don't have to be mad at LeBron for not coming to save our neighborhoods. We can collectively invest and buy back our blocks, buy the block literally. So I opened it up for a crowdfund. We raised over $1 million. That $1 million, some of it went towards the acquisition costs, and the rest of it is going towards the renovations. So I went in and started in March, and first thing I did after I closed on it was let the tenants know I'm not displacing anybody. I'm not raising anybody's rent, because I want y'all, even though everything is going to be revitalized around you, you're still going to be stable. You can have a place to live. And I was able to do that because the sellers worked with me on the purchase structure, and there was enough revenue coming from it to where the investment still made sense, right? And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Like we're usually taught that you have to buy it and raise the rent as high as possible to maximize your profit. You don't really have to do that if you're in an area where the property values are going to go up because there's a lot of new development going around you. You get a return on your investment just by holding the real estate. So that's the blueprint that I've been trying to create. So long story short, I went in, we did all the residential renovations. We fixed up some of the houses that needed repairs. I put screens in everybody's windows, dark screens, so that electricity bills will be better. Did landscaping throughout the property, repaved the property, and now we're taking the 2 commercial buildings that were basically vacant, renovating them. So now you're bringing business back, which is going to bring jobs back, and we're taking something that used to be kind of an eyesore on the Lyons Avenue Street, making it now a point of destination, a point of attraction. So one of the properties will be finished in the next week or so, and it's going to be catering to entrepreneurs that need business space for short term. So think about Airbnb, but for business purposes, like if you need office space for a day or a week, or you want to hold a training class for a couple of days, you can rent one of the rooms in there. Not so much like a share space, or not so much a co-working space, but a true short-term lease, like an alternative to renting a conference room at a hotel or something like that.
That's nice. Almost like the executive office suites, if you will.
Yeah.
Like Regis or something like that.
Right. Something like that. People can rent it for a day or a week, whatever, a couple hours. And then the other building right now, it's probably going to be a coffee shop. I have 2 different potential commercial tenants that have either one is a smoothie shop and the other one's a coffee shop. That'll be there. That'll be the first, Wi-Fi meetup spot in the community. And like I said, like you mentioned earlier, after we closed on it, we found out about 2 months ago that it has already been approved to be the first cultural arts district in a historically Black neighborhood in Houston. So so we're right in the heart of that. So we're basically turning the property around. Everybody that bought shares of ownership in this actually can say every time they pass by, they can say they own a piece of that, And it's just a story that I feel like we can repeat from city to city and neighborhood to neighborhood and just continue the growth trajectory. Over the next 5 years, I expect the property value to double easily, just because of location and watching what happened in other areas of Houston when this type of revitalization started. For instance, where the same developer that's building in Fifth Ward now, when they built in Memorial, the Spring Branch area was equivalent to what Fifth Ward was before. It was just like a very low income Hispanic community where you could buy property for $25,000. Well, now you go to Spring Branch, you can't buy anything for less than $250,000. Just a lot of vacant right, $1 million homes over there. So if you look at where this project is, it's almost identical. It's the same geographic separation from where the development is to where the lower income Fifth Ward is. And so it's going to be the same storyline. So when I say it's going to double, I could say it's probably going to go a whole lot higher, but I'm just being conservative,
Being conservative. How do we? Well, you've closed the crowdfunding that you did. So how would we reinvest later if you want to put your coins together, be ready? Is there going to be another opportunity to invest for another phase, or what does that look like to get in on future projects?
Yeah, I'm always actively looking for new projects. It just has to make sense. I don't like taking investors' capital or anything that I feel like is going to be risky. So it has to be a very solid bet. And like I said, this project, the 18 houses had long-term tenants, long-term stable revenue. So I feel like that was a comfortable investment vehicle to bring a lot of people in on. So just looking for more opportunities like that. I do have smaller projects for people that have a little bit higher risk tolerance, or maybe you can invest and leave your money in something for a little bit longer while we turn it around or build something new. I will have some of those. But anybody interested, you could, of course, follow me on social media, _investor. Send me an email at chris@learnfromchris.com, and I'll add you to my distribution list for upcoming projects. But I'm pretty sure you can go to my website, chrissenegal.com, and keep in contact with me there, or follow whatever I have going on.
Thank you. This is a movement, man. It is, and I'm happy to be a part of it. And I feel like you said, you do feel like you are a part of something great, and not even a feeling, but knowing that you're a part of something great. And like you said, you cast the vision, you went out there and you did the work on your own. And it's one of those, like the word says, right? Write the vision and make it plain, and he that can run with it. And I feel like you're definitely in that phase. You written it and you start walking it out yourself, and just to see it unfolding is truly a blessing. So we thank you for having the foresight to do it.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate everybody believing in the vision to actually, put the communication out there for people to really buy in without even actually seeing it done before. It took everybody. So everybody that invested was really a part of making this a reality. So,
dope.
Yeah.
So now you want to leave us with anything? We're getting ready to get out of here. We thank you, but we know you're a busy man, and we're at the hour. We're gonna close it out. But yeah, leave us with a nugget, a book, or something.
I would say one of the most powerful quotes recently that I ran across was when Will Smith first got back on Instagram, and he made a statement that he said, it may not be your fault of what happened to you in the past or how you got to where you are, but it's your responsibility to figure out how to get out of it. And so you have to stop pointing the finger, placing the blame, and expecting someone else to do everything to rectify something that was done to you wrongly in the past. You have to stand up. You have to we have a lot of historians. We have a lot of debaters. We need more problem solvers. So if you feel like you want to be in that bucket, I challenge you to actually do that, step out on faith and become a problem solver and try to fix some of the things that we all know. We all know the challenges that we have. We all know, but let's stop having those same conversations and focus on, bringing ourselves up.
Ashe. In the African tradition, we have Ashe means our words have power. We have the power to basically speak a thing into existence. You heard it here from Chris Senegal. He said to be a problem solver. Take this, go out and speak it. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Chris, thank you so much for blessing us with your time. Great conversation, great information. And until next Thursday, good night.
All right.